You are staring at a blank document, or maybe you're looking at a pair of running shoes by the door, right? And there is this immediate, almost physical weight that just kind of drops into your stomach.
Oh, absolutely. It's that overwhelming instinct to just walk away.
Yeah, exactly. To
Yeah.
close the laptop, to sit back down and, just choose the path of least resistance.
Right, because what you are experiencing there is the anticipation of friction. Your mind is projecting forward.
It's doing the math.
It is doing the math, yeah.
Yeah.
It's calculating the energy expenditure required for whatever task lies ahead, and it's basically concluding that the cost is simply too high.
And I mean, that friction feels monumental. It feels like this impenetrable wall. But what if we are fundamentally misinterpreting what that wall actually is?
Well, that's exactly what we need to figure out today.
Welcome to the deep dive. If you are joining us today, you're likely standing at the starting line of something new.
Maybe you're trying to build a habit or learn a complex skill or, just upgrade how you operate day to day.
Right. Today's mission is tailored specifically for you, especially if you are someone looking to understand the foundational mindset of self-improvement.
We really want to examine the bedrock of why we choose to do difficult things in the first place.
And we're doing this by analyzing what might actually be the most concise piece of source material we have ever covered.
I mean, it really is. In a landscape that's just saturated with endless books and seminars and incredibly complex systems for optimizing your life, we are looking at a document that strips all of that completely away.
It's so refreshing. So the source text is titled The Eternal Yield of Fleeting Pain. And the text itself is exactly 2 sentences long.
Just 7 words in total.
Literally 7 words. Pain is temporary, success is forever. That is the entirety of the material.
It's amazing. 7 words that essentially function as a complete philosophical framework. And, the brevity is the point.
Right, because when you're in it, when you are overwhelmed by the prospect of a difficult task, you do not have the cognitive bandwidth to recall some 12-step optimization program.
Exactly. You need an immediate, crystalline truth to just anchor your perspective.
Okay, let's unpack this. How can just 7 words serve as a complete psychological operating system for anyone starting a journey of personal growth?
Well, to answer that, we really must rigorously deconstruct the specific language the author chose.
Really zoom in on it.
Yeah, we need to examine words like yield, fleeting, eternal, temporary, and forever. The relationship between these specific words reveals why this isn't merely like a motivational poster slogan.
Right, it's not just hype.
It's a logical equation. And honestly, internalizing this equation is the absolute prerequisite for any meaningful self-improvement.
So let's start with the framework that surrounds those key sentences, because before we even get to the core quote, we have to examine the title, right? The eternal yield of fleeting pain.
It sets the entire stage.
It really does. I want to focus intensely on that word, yield. When I read this, the immediate association I have is financial.
Oh, totally, like a high-yield account.
Exactly. And I think for someone new to personal development concepts, looking at effort through an economic lens is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. It changes everything.
Think of self-improvement as an asymmetric investment vehicle. When you deposit money into a high-yield account, you are making a deliberate sacrifice.
You're surrendering the purchasing power of that capital in the present moment.
Yeah.
You can't spend it on immediate gratification.
Right. No buying shoes today. But you're doing so because the math dictates that the future return will disproportionately outweigh the present sacrifice.
Treating effort as a transaction rather than a punishment fundamentally changes your relationship with difficulty.
Yes. So in the context of this text, the pain, the frustration of studying, or the awkwardness of being terrible at a new skill, or even physical exhaustion, it is not a sign that something is wrong.
It's just a cost.
Exactly. That pain is simply the currency you are spending to purchase an eternal yield.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what you are describing is the foundational concept of time arbitrage.
Time arbitrage. Okay, explain that for someone who might not know the finance jargon.
Sure. So in traditional finance, arbitrage involves exploiting a price discrepancy between 2 different markets to generate a risk-free return.
Okay, yeah.
In the philosophy of personal growth, time arbitrage is exploiting the profound difference in value between your present comfort and your future capability.
Wow, I want to linger on that because the author deliberately sets up this exact contrast in the title.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
They juxtapose fleeting, meaning passing instantaneously, with eternal, meaning lasting without end.
So you are basically trading something tiny for something massive?
Precisely. The core mechanism of all self-improvement is essentially training the mind to become a master of this specific trade.
Yeah.
You are bartering a fleeting present for an eternal future.
But the dilemma for anyone starting this journey is that our human brains are intensely biased against making this trade.
Oh, deeply biased.
Mm.
Because the present is vivid, it's loud, and it's experiential.
Right.
The future is abstract, quiet, and purely theoretical.
The friction of the present moment always feels more real than the promise of the future yield. I mean, when you sit down to learn a difficult new concept, the cognitive strain is immediate.
The confusion is happening right now.
Right now, the future capability you are trying to purchase feels like a ghost.
Which is exactly why the title's premise is so critical here. By explicitly framing the pain as fleeting and the yield as eternal, the author is demanding that we override our default bias toward the present.
We have to intellectually force ourselves to see the math.
We do. We have to recognize the asymmetry of the trade. A minor passing discomfort is basically buying an infinite return.
But I feel like this requires a really conscious, forceful shift in perspective, especially for beginners.
It absolutely does.
You have to stop viewing the difficulty of learning as a barrier preventing you from moving forward and start viewing it as the literal toll booth you must pass through to acquire the yield.
I love that. The friction is literally the sound of the transaction clearing.
The sound of the transaction clearing, that is so good.
So having established that economic framework, the logic naturally progresses to the first half of the core quote, which is, pain is temporary.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Because if I am a beginner and I am currently drowning in the frustration of a new endeavor, I am going to challenge this premise hard.
Of course you are. It feels awful in the moment.
Right, like if pain is strictly temporary, why does the subjective experience of it feel so agonizingly permanent?
It feels like it will never end.
Exactly. When you are 30 minutes into a deeply confusing tutorial or halfway through a grueling physical task, the mind does not calmly observe that the state is temporary. The mind insists that this discomfort is your new permanent reality.
What's fascinating here is how we must rigorously define what the author means by pain.
Okay, break that down for us.
The text is not referring to the pain of destruction. If you place your hand on a burning surface, the pain is an alarm signaling acute physical damage.
Right, and the correct response there is to stop immediately. Get your hand off the stove.
Exactly. Immediate cessation. But the pain of self-improvement, the cognitive overload of a new language, or the deep vulnerability of practicing a new social skill, or the physical burning of exercise, that is the friction of adaptation.
Okay, so it's friction, not destruction.
Yeah.
But the problem is that our internal warning systems conflate the two completely.
They absolutely do. The mind registers the intense energy requirement of adaptation and sounds the exact same alarm it uses for physical danger.
It just screams at you to stop.
It demands that you stop and conserve energy. Yeah.
Eh.
Recognizing the fundamental difference between the alarm of destruction and the friction of growth
Mm.
is probably the single most important milestone for a beginner.
Because the panic is basically a false positive.
Exactly. It's a total misinterpretation of the data.
So when the text asserts that pain is temporary, it's not just offering some soothing platitude.
No, not at all. It is providing a logical countermeasure to deploy against that exact false positive.
Okay, I see.
When the emotional response is screaming that the friction will last forever, the text offers an objective truth, which is that the discomfort of adaptation is, by definition, self-limiting.
Let's break down why it is self-limiting. Like, if I'm learning to play a complex piece of music, the initial cognitive strain is immense.
It's exhausting.
It is. It requires total, exhausting focus just to place my fingers on the correct keys.
Well, that's because the required capability far exceeds your current capability. The friction you feel is the precise measurement of that gap.
But as you practice, the adaptation actually occurs.
Right. The mind and body reorganize themselves to accommodate the new demand. The gap closes.
And as the gap closes, the friction inherently diminishes.
Precisely.
So the temporary nature of the pain is a structural guarantee.
Yeah.
It has an expiration date built right into the process of adaptation.
The discomfort literally must end because the organism adapts to the stressor.
That is so incredibly freeing to think about.
Once you truly internalize this mechanism, once you understand that the wall of friction is actually just a tunnel with a fixed exit point, it strips the discomfort of its psychological terror.
You stop panicking about the dark, and you simply continue walking until you reach the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. You just keep walking.
But wait, let me push back a little here. If I am constantly pursuing self-improvement, am I not just moving from one tunnel to the
That
next?
is a very fair question.
Right, because if I conquer one skill and immediately start another, the friction returns. So is the pain actually temporary, or is it just a permanent state of transient struggles?
Well, the pursuit of growth may be continuous, sure, but the specific pain of acquiring any single capability is strictly temporary.
Ah, okay.
The friction associated with learning that specific piece of music or that specific programming language that will permanently vanish once mastery is achieved. The pain of that particular acquisition is entirely finite.
Which perfectly bridges us to the crucial second half of the equation, right? Because understanding that the friction is finite, that the tunnel eventually ends, that's really only half the battle.
It is. Knowing the tunnel has an exit doesn't automatically make you want to walk into the dark.
Exactly. That logical fact alone does not provide the motivation to enter the darkness in the first place.
Hmm.
The engine driving this entire psychological operating system is the second sentence. Success is forever.
And this is the realization of the eternal yield that was promised in the title.
This is where the asymmetry of the time arbitrage trade is fully revealed, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Think about the process of learning to read. For a young child, the acquisition of literacy is an arduous, deeply frustrating process.
Oh, it's incredibly tough.
It involves agonizing over strange symbols, slowly connecting these abstract shapes to sounds, and battling just constant mental exhaustion. The friction is high, and the pain of that cognitive load is very, very real.
Yeah, look at the aftermath of that process.
Right. The friction completely evaporated the moment literacy was achieved. The headaches, the frustration, the tears, they are entirely gone.
Gone completely.
But the success, the permanent installation of reading capability into the architecture of the mind, that really is forever.
You cannot unread a sign on the street, even if you try.
You can't. The temporary pain purchased a permanent, irreversible upgrade to your perception of reality.
And the uncompromising absolute of the word forever in this text just cannot be overstated.
It's a huge claim.
It is. In common parlance, success is often defined as an event, a promotion, a financial milestone, maybe a public victory.
Like winning a medal or something.
Right. But these are circumstantial achievements. They're external trophies, and by their very nature, they're subject to decay. A trophy gathers dust. A title can be lost.
Yeah, and if the author meant success in that external, circumstantial way, then the text would be logically flawed, because circumstantial success is absolutely not forever.
Exactly. Therefore, the author must be defining success in a much more profound structural way.
So what does success actually mean in this context?
In the true context of self-improvement, success is not an event you attend. It is a fundamental expansion of your capacity.
I love that. An expansion of capacity.
When you endure the temporary friction to build emotional resilience, or to master a complex physical discipline, or to understand advanced mathematics, you are fundamentally altering the borders of what you're capable of doing.
You are expanding the perimeter of your potential.
The perimeter is permanently expanded.
Mm-hmm.
You transition from being a person who cannot do the thing to a person who can.
And that doesn't just go away.
No. Even if you neglect the skill and it degrades over time, the conceptual framework, the paradigm shift of having mastered it, remains permanently etched into your cognitive architecture.
It is the difference between renting a tool and building a bridge.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Renting the tool might solve a momentary problem, but building the bridge permanently alters the landscape. The construction of the bridge is loud, it's disruptive, and it's costly. It requires immense temporary effort.
But once the structure is in place, you cross that river effortlessly for the rest of your life.
The utility of the bridge is forever.
And focusing on the noise and disruption of the construction phase, rather than the permanent utility of the completed bridge, is exactly why so many people abandon the journey of personal growth.
They evaluate the trade poorly.
They do. They overvalue the temporary quiet of avoiding the work, and they vastly undervalue the eternal yield of the completed structure.
Which completely explains why these 7 words function as a comprehensive operating system. They force a structural realignment of how we evaluate difficult tasks.
They demand that we look past the immediate sensory input of the friction.
And anchor our decision-making to the permanence of the outcome.
It acts as an immediate pattern interrupt. When a beginner faces that wall of resistance, When the textbook is opened and the cognitive strain hits, or when the alarm goes off for that early workout, the mind's default primitive script will activate.
It will argue that the discomfort is permanent and totally meaningless.
Right. The internal monologue will insist that stopping is the only logical choice.
But this text provides the counterscript. You deploy it to interrupt the panic.
Yes, you recognize the friction for what it is, the temporary cost of acquisition.
You remind yourself that the sensation of difficulty is literally a fleeting illusion of permanence, and that the capability you are actively purchasing will belong to you forever.
You assert your executive function over that primitive alarm.
You are essentially reminding yourself of the math. I am trading a finite amount of discomfort for an infinite amount of capability. The math works.
The math is undeniably in the practitioner's favor. And I think the most powerful aspect of this framework is that it compounds over time.
Oh, in what way?
Well, every single time you successfully navigate the temporary pain and secure the permanent success, you gather empirical evidence that the framework is accurate.
You prove the 7 words true through your own lived experience.
Exactly. The next time you face a daunting challenge, the friction will still exist, of course, but your trust in the eternal yield will be absolute.
So, what does this all mean? We began by asking how a 7-word phrase could serve as the foundational mindset for anyone embarking on a journey of self-improvement.
And through dissecting the language, we found that it really comes down to a radical economic reframing of struggle.
It is the shift from viewing difficulty as an obstacle to viewing it as an investment. When you begin any meaningful endeavor, you will encounter intense friction.
That is just a structural necessity of growth.
But you must categorize that friction correctly. You are not suffering. You are executing a highly advantageous trade.
The pain is merely the temporary price required for a permanent upgrade to your capabilities.
The disparity between the cost and the reward is staggering, honestly.
It really is. A few hours, weeks, or even months of fleeting cognitive or physical strain is mathematically insignificant compared to decades of possessing a new strength, a sharper intellect, or a deeper resilience.
The mantra, pain is temporary, success is forever, cuts through the complexity of modern optimization culture. It serves as a true north, orienting you away from the illusion of present comfort and toward the reality of lasting capability.
It strips away all the noise. It's just an objective statement of value.
So as we conclude today's deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final question to turn over in your own mind.
This is the important part.
Think back to that heavy feeling of avoidance we discussed at the very beginning, the instinct to walk away from the blank page or the running shoes.
Right, that immediate friction.
If this source text is factually correct, if the capability you desire truly is forever and the friction required to attain it is strictly temporary, what fleeting pain are you actively avoiding right now that is secretly costing you an eternal yield?